So real quick before we get started, today's video sponsor is Super Clean. I really appreciate working with Super Clean here, and what I'm going to be doing is giving you'll get sent these two products here from Super Clean, the original spray and then the foaming can, which actually is probably what my favorite is because you can see it go on and it cleans really well for that greasy stuff. So if you're interested in getting some free Super Clean products here, I'll have a link down in my description. Go to my Instagram, comment Super Clean on my post that I'll have here of the Super Clean with the Boss 429 on it, and I'll pick one winner and they'll send you out these two products here. But I appreciate Super Clean for sponsoring this video. For today's video, I'm going to be doing the headliner in the black Boss 429 here behind me. So if you're someone that's looking to do a headliner, hopefully this helps you out in that process. I'll try and give as much detail on what I got here sitting out. I'll show you all the pieces that you need to do this and what to look for, and try and give you a little bit of clues on how to pull it and stretch it and do stuff like that. Headliners are one of my favorite things to do, strangely, just because it's real straightforward, easy, relaxing. There's not much going on. You just go about it until it's done. So I have everything pretty much laid out here on the table that I need to do it. All the headliner rods, and I mark them whenever they come out. One front being the front one, and then 2, 3, 4 rear. For this fastback model, there's 4 of them, and then the 2 smaller rods that hold the 4th one back in place, which I'll show you once I set it up in place. Scissors to cut it. I'm going to scuff the surfaces on the body first, so it has something to bite to with the glue, and then I'll clean it off with the clean prep. Set the rods up on top with the headliner stretched out, set the rods in, measure them out, trim that up so it's ready to go in. I have the clear protective stuff I just put over the roof of the car because that's where I set the headliner out. And then headliner insulation, which gets glued up on the bottom of the inside of the roof. So that'll be first. I'll use spray glue. I'll spray on the top side of that roof there, and then I'll spray the actual insulation. You'll see once I pull this out, spray that, meet those two together, sandwich that up in there, and then I'll put these rods through, trim this up, then we'll set it in place, and then I'll show how I'm pulling it and the process of doing that. And there's also screws that I put up in place of like where your sun visors are, like your sun visor brackets, your coat hooks. For 6970, there's a trim piece that goes along the whole front of the windshield inside. There's holes there because you don't want to be fishing for holes afterward. If you put the screw in place, afterward you can feel where that screw is under the headliner, and you can pop it out through that way. That's the easy way to figure that out. So I'll show you all that stuff, and you also need the headliner glue. This is what I use, 1829 weld on, which is impossible to find right now. Luckily, I bought a bunch of cans a while back, and this is the last of them that I have. So I have enough to do this headliner here today. So that's pretty much it. I'll get started. I'll set everything out, scuff the surfaces, clean it, get the headliner ready, set it in place, and start stretching, and we'll have this headliner here done in a couple hours. And yeah, let's get started. All right, so the first thing, like I said, I'm going to do, I have the maroon Scotch-Brite here, and wherever the headliner is going to glue on to this painted surface, I go ahead and scuff it up pretty good, just running it along like this, scuffing it up. Nothing crazy, just make sure you don't hit the outside of the car, obviously. And then I'll go back with the clean prep, wipe that off, and I also do the bottom side also. You can see that I'm on the bottom side because whenever I'm gluing, I'll put a little bit of glue on the bottom side and top side so it pinches it whenever I put it together and have it set overnight to glue up. That way it has the most contact with the most amount of glue, so it stays in place whenever you go to put in like your windshield, your back window, or your wind lace that's going along here. Whenever you pull off, I actually use little strips of wind lace. So this is my box of headliner wind lace that I'm using. I cut them into little sections like that. Sometimes some of them are different sizes, like these are maybe like 2 inches. Sometimes I make little small ones like 1/2 inch, 3/4 that you can fit in between if you need to. But I'll put them up against each other. You'll see me whenever I'm pulling that headliner, I'll pull the headliner up over, use this clip, push it on, pinches that headliner in between, and that's what's going to hold it the whole time until that glue is nice and set up. And that's what I'm using the whole way around all 4 corners here of the car. So those are also what you need. I didn't show that in the beginning, but let's get scuffing. Spray glue that I'm using, 3M, just a high strength, 90. That seems to work pretty good for this type of stuff. You do not want to use this for the headliner glue. It won't work. You have to use something similar to that. That's the only glue that I showed earlier in the video that works for the headliner. That stuff sticks. That's what I highly recommend to use. If you can find some, they're supposed to be coming out soon, back in stock. So that's what I would recommend to use. But after spraying both the roof and the back of this insulation, I let it just tack up for like a minute, 2 minutes, and then I'll stick it up in place and it'll be good to go. All right, so after I have the headliner insulation in place, I'm gonna go ahead and take your screws, which you could use whatever your new ones that you're getting for your sun visors or for this front trim molding. But what I'm doing is I'm filling these holes with these screws. Anything that's in the going through your headliner, I would put your screws in place. And I leave it just hanging out, you know, a couple threads. That way you can easily push up. Once the headliner's in, you can push up with your finger and feel the head of that screw. And then you'll see in the end, I'll go through and I'll puncture through them and screw those back down through the headliner, and it makes its own hole for you. So you don't have to guess where those holes are at. And then, like I said, with these, you have the front holes here for this trim molding that goes the whole way across the front. So I'm gonna put those screws in. The other sun visor, if you have overhead belts that lap into there, coat hooks in the back, and that's pretty much it for 6970. But some of the other years have your rear view mirror mount there also, so you want to put those screws in. Anything that's up top there that you want to, so I'm going to put those in before I move on to the next part. So I'm going to take this and just run it across the top just to protect the paint on it, because I lay the headliner out across it to measure it out. And I'm gonna come up here, take my headliner out and lay it up there. And then in case anyone is wondering what brand, Distinctive Industries is who I use for all of my headliners. I've always really liked the quality of their headliner, as opposed to someone like TMI, which I've used the TMI. Generally, I've used a little bit of everything just to see what I like the best. And as far as headliners go, I've always gone with Distinctive Industries. The same with their upholstery, and a bunch of other stuff. It just stretches really well. And the way that I'll show you that I trim up, once I put the rods in here, it pulls nicely. It has a nice curve at the end where it's meeting the sides here. And ends up being a better finished product. So I'm gonna lay this out up here, go ahead and take my rods, run them through, measure, trim the ends of these, because these you have to trim. There's a little bit of an art to this, but hopefully by this video here you can get a good idea on doing your own. All right, so this is one of the more important tricky parts here, is setting these in the right locations. First off, getting them correct with the front one, second one, third one, fourth one, because they are different. And then you want to measure these rods center out to get them even in the headliner. You want them centered in the headliner so that you can trim up the ends. As you can see, they're stitched the whole way to the end of the panel. So first thing you're doing with these distinctive headliners, they have a notch here that is setting where center line of the headliner is. Each one of these rows has that center cut line in it. So what I'm doing, taking my tape measure, I'm setting it in that center cut, running it out to the end of the rod where you can feel in the headliner here. You can see that's where it's poking at it. So measuring from center out, like just for instance, this front one is, to make it center, is 24 inches. So set my tape measure there, running it out, measuring it 24 inches, going on the other side, center out, making sure that that's also 24 inches. And then the same thing back. So, and they're longer as they get back, so the number is going to be different, but measure center out, and if it's different, adjust the rod until you got it centered, center, center. And that way you know when you're trimming up the ends here that you're trimming them in the right positions. Now, I wish I had a head mount to show you exactly how I trim these up, but I'll trim one up and come back in and show it, so just to make it a little bit easy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the center of this large fold that the rod is actually in. I'm going to go cut it up the whole way until halfway on the bend of the end of the rod, which is, there's no specific measurement of how far that bend is. I feel where the rod is starting to curve on it, and then I go about half that distance from the end of the rod up. So I'm going to cut it in there. It's probably about 2.5, 3 inches long, so say 1.5 inches up is where I'm going to cut it. And you'll see the design cut that I have on that, and that's what I'll do to each side the whole way back. And then before I put it in the car. But I'll trim these up and come back and show you exactly what I mean, because it's a little hard to describe. And this is just the way that I was taught to do it. So, and it's worked ever since, so not going to change now. It works for me, so hopefully it'll work for you. So I'll trim these up, come back and show you exactly how I did that. Okay, so if you could tell from the video kind of what I was doing, you could see everything that I trimmed away. The loop side, I trim it close, maybe, you know, between 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch on both sides. So there's not as much material that you're pulling on whenever you're looping it up over the body of the car. But you can see I trimmed in there about halfway on the bend. The bend starts about here, and down there is the end of the rod. So I trimmed it up until about halfway, and I tapered it. You see I cut close, taper it out when it gets to the rod to that point, and then on the other side I trim it the same way. I just taper it out until it gets to that same point across, just to get rid of the excess on the other side. But do that to each of them down so that half that bend on that rod is sticking out, and then it's going to be ready to stick into the car. And on the inside of the car, which I'll have a light in here then to make it a little easier to see, but there are 2 sets of holes on each of these cars that the rods could go in. I would kind of keep track of which one yours came out of, but typically all the ones that I've done, I've used the upper hole on. It seems to work a little bit better to get the rods to be up on this insulation, because it helps it from moving if it's up tight against that insulation. So that's where I'll start. I'll put them in the top holes on each one. You want to make sure they're the same on each one. They should be. And then you'll start stretching. You put the back rods on, which I'll show you here. It is pretty involved, so if it's your first time, it's going to be a little bit scary, but the worst that can happen is you just mess up your headliner and you got to redo it, which is, it would be what it would be. So it's not that big of a deal if you're going to practice and try it at least once. So I'll set these up in place, show you how the back retaining rods, the little ones that are on the trailing fourth one, they'll hook into this and hook onto the body inside on the car. That keeps the back rod in place so that when you start, you pull your headliner forward, it pulls against that back one, pulling all the tension on it. I'll set my front end, go to the back, and then side to side, which you'll see in the video. So that's what we'll do next. I'll set the headliner up into the holes. So now, things that you need to prep in the back side here is the two retaining rods that are going to hook through the material on this back rod and hold it to these holes. There's two small holes here at the top in the body of the car. So you're going to hook those into the body of the car, loop it into the headliner rod there, and that's what's going to keep this tension on this back rod so that when you pull the headliner forward, it's holding this back rod in place. Otherwise, it's just going to cave them all in. So you need to hook these in place. But just to make sure that your headliner is pulled out a little bit, pull it across so it's nice and tight going that way, at least a little bit, as much as you can, making sure that it's even on both ends. And then I'm going to hook these in into the back like that. And then keeping it nice and straight, I'm going to pull this rod down. Hopefully you can see it somewhat here. Loop it onto that, hook it into the material going around the rod, and now it's holding that rod in place. And you can see it's pulling it back. If I push forward, it's locked in there. So I'll pop this one in. Pull it through. Like that. So now your back rod there is good to go. And whenever you see me, I'll set up just a time lapse of pulling everything. And then I'll clue you in on how I'm pulling, because it's hard to guess your tension of how much you need to pull on it. But you're going to start with the front now, pull that up over the windshield lip to glue it, and it's going to pull all the tension forward here. And this is going to hold this back in place. The only other thing for 6970 that you need to do is these back parts here is where your headliner is going to connect. These little clips, not clips, but they're just sharp triangles here on this back panel. You need to take your needle nose, come in here and bend them out straight again, like that. If you can make that out. You can see how they're still folded over from the old headliner. You want to poke those out straight so that whenever you're pulling the headliner over, you're poking into there and then re-hitting those back over. And that's what's holding your headliner in the back corner here. So I'm going to go ahead and undo those, make those straight again on both sides before I start pulling on the front side. All right, so now I'm gonna work on these front corners. They're similar to the back corners when you're going around a turn here. You have to relief cut on the side of it. Like for example here, it's gonna, the panel here is gonna start curving down, the A-pillar here. So I'm just trimming up and making a cut the whole way up here, like that, so that it's separated there and it can start making the curve. Otherwise you're pulling, you can't stretch that panel that far to make a curve. So you're gonna have to do some relief cuts to go around the edge, which this is a tricky part because you don't wanna cut too far or else you're gonna ruin your headliner. So the trick is to just pull at some different angles to try and get it the way that you need it to go first, and just make your first relief cut and work it. I set these in place and clip them on as I go before I glue it. I'll get it right, pull it back apart, and then I'll go ahead and glue it. So I'm gonna go ahead and start trimming this up and getting it right. And you also gotta account for your trim molding on your inside pillar is gonna come up to here, and then it's gonna come across here, probably about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. So you're not gonna see a lot of this corner. So if you have a wrinkle deep in this corner, it's not gonna matter. So if you see anything here, it's not gonna be any big deal, but I should be able to get it so that there's no wrinkles in there. And then once you put your moldings on, it'll end up looking like that anyway on the top side. So I'm gonna start clipping here and get it set up and glue it and do the other side, and then we'll go to the back corners to finish it off. All right, so now for the last part, the back corners, it's a matter of going around corners again and just taking it down as far as you can, getting this last bow straight with getting all the wrinkles out of this back corner. And then this section here is all taken care of by the spikes that we pulled out earlier. They're going to be, I'm going to do the corners first, get those right, make sure that it's going to pull out my stretch my wrinkles out before I poke them into them. I'm going to poke those last. So I'll make my cuts, glue these sections, and then I'll come back, pull this section tight, get these wrinkles out, and I'll poke maybe like 2 at a time through, and you'll see me come in with the hammer and I'll hit those spikes over, and they're gonna go over the headliner holding that down. This is just a body hammer, which works really well because it has the pointed end on here. It's not too sharp, that I can just go in there and just tap those spikes down, hold that headliner in place. So I'm gonna go ahead, make the cuts, glue it, stick this section down so you can see how that's done, and then we'll just go back over and check out how it looks in the end, and that'll be it for the headliner. So that's going to do it for this video. Headliner's all done as far as it can go for now. All the glue's got to dry. It says 72 hours until it's fully cured. And then I'll go back in about 2 days, 3 days, trim off this extra headliner that's all around everywhere. And then I'll put the windlace on and get rid of my strips on the side. Leave the front and back off, or leave them on until I'm ready to put the glass in on both ends. And that's buttons up all the way around it. But hopefully that was helpful for anyone that might be interested in doing a headliner, or just something cool to watch and something new to learn and see how it's done. I've done, I don't know, I was trying to think how many headliners I might have done. Maybe, I've done at least 50 to 100, somewhere in there, of headliners. It's just a relaxing thing to do. Pretty straightforward. If you mess up, you can take it back out and do it again. If it's your first time, maybe just do it. Put all your trims all around the weather strip or the windlace pieces like I have to hold it in place without gluing it for your first time, and just so you can run through the whole thing and see how it goes before you go ahead and glue it. That's also an option. Yeah, give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Share it, subscribe if you're not subscribed. Let me know if there's any other specific like install type videos like this one is on this Boss 429. I'm gonna do gas tank and how to properly install that and seal that off on the trunk floors, and just some other stuff, maybe like the heater box, things like that. But otherwise I'll have videos on some other projects maybe here coming up. The green car sitting over there. But that's gonna do it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.